Thanks for tuning in to Local Legacies from the Central Mass Production Studio, for the first time ever on video, presenting one of the three original founders of Wachusett Brewing Company, Ned LaFortune. Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. Today I have a guest here that when I first came up with the idea for this show, I thought, if one day everything went perfectly, maybe I could get this guy in here to have a conversation with. Very happy to welcome Ned LaFortune, Wachusett Brewing Company. How you doing today, Ned?
Doing great, Tim. It's really awesome to be here, and I really appreciate hearing something like that, but that's just like totally not my style usually. I'm just a guy who just was lucky enough to be able to put together a company that this community supported. And fortunate to be here right now, able to talk to you about it. Really appreciate it.
Well, you've done an excellent job of supporting the community throughout the entire time of your existence, so I think that they've chosen to support you back, and that's how we got here.
It is.
So why don't we talk a little bit about how you got started, wherever you want to jump off from?
Yeah, there's it's definitely kind of an interesting story how this all came together, and I think I have to go back as far as my growing up on October Farm in Westminster, and part of the reason for that is that's where we brewed our first batches of beer, and there's a lot of backstory from growing up there and spending time there, spending time with my father, working on the farm was a really unique experience that I don't think that many people can say that they've had. Can I swear?
Of course.
I shoveled more shit than anyone else in our elementary school. I guarantee it, except for maybe a couple that owned real farms. Ours was a recreational farm, but what we did there, from when I was, old enough to walk, I spent time with my dad on, when I got into elementary school on weekends, all weekend long, working with my dad on the farm. And that meant mornings and nights too, but I had to go to school. The only thing I'd do to kind of escape the work is on Saturdays I'd watch Creature Double Feature. It was a black and white show on like channel 56 in the time. And that would be my only like relaxation or escape from it. But the thing was, like, I didn't really need to escape because I loved it. I absolutely loved it. We were installing fences. We were doing firewood. We were harvesting out of a giant garden he had. It was a multi-acre garden. We did all our own haying. We had cows, pigs, chickens, horses, sheep. Always had dogs around, barn cats. I mean, it was just a really great place to grow up and a great experience to be in. And so different than what I see happening right now with, generations that are coming through now. My dad wouldn't allow us to have video games. There's no such thing. I wanted an Atari so bad. No chance. No way could I have an Atari. If I wanted to play Atari, I had to go to my uncle's house or something and play Asteroids. And so that's what I did. And it was fine. It was like, all right, that's enough of that. Get back to the farm and do our thing. So growing up there, it was the work ethic that he instilled in me, and it was awesome. It was fun. I loved it, and I'm fortunate to say that I now own the farm. Well, I own a chunk of it. We'll kind of get to that maybe later on, but that's kind of a project of mine right now, is to figure out how to preserve such an incredible place that they were able to somehow pull together in the 60s. Two teachers that didn't really have the money to be able to do that, and they pulled it off. So it's kind of an inspirational story in itself. So that's definitely the foundation. I can go on if you wanted me to just keep rolling with that.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering, clearly your dad was a strong influence on you. How did that relationship and how did he kind of shape who you've become?
Well, the thing about my dad was they called him the gentle giant. He was 6'4". He's a very big guy, but he was the most quiet, soft-spoken man you'll ever meet. The only time he ever raised his voice at me was when I finally told him that I quit my job in engineering, was starting Wachusett Brewing Company. He stood up at the table and said, "You are not leaving your job." And I told him, "Dad, I already gave my resignation." He was so upset. He didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. But overall, I mean, he was just someone that he was definitely very different than me. He was in guidance. He started out as a biology teacher at Oakmont Regional when it first opened. He got into guidance. He got a master's in education. Was able to move into guidance. He was at Monty Tech when it opened in 1970. So he was at both of those two schools when they both opened in different roles. And he was just a very peaceful leader for students, and was extremely helpful to them. And I hear even to as recently as this weekend, running into either students or both students of the education side of biology, and then students that had him as a counselor, telling me about how helpful he was to them in helping them make decisions about their lives. So, and that's the influence that I had. He told me if I wanted to have good things, I needed to go to college, get an education, and get a good job. He told me that ever since I was a kid, and that was a strong influence on me. The interesting thing about the difference between my dad and myself is that he didn't take any risks, ever. And I've kind of talked about that. I talked about it with my wife, and it's an interesting dichotomy where, he was a leader in a different way. My grandfather was actually a business owner and an entrepreneur and a pilot way back in the 30s. And it's kind of interesting because I actually had a passion for it, and I've actually pursued that. And I went out and bought a powered parachute last year, and I started flying on my own. And it was one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life. And is unquestionably the highest risk I've ever taken in my life. And it's so opposite of anything my dad would have ever done. But so is starting the brewery. He would never have taken those risks. So I don't know. They say sometimes it skips a generation. So it's possible that, really Grandpa Cliff was the strong influence in me somehow, because I've been a risk taker my entire life.
Well, I think that happens a lot. People look at business as being risky, and it's funny, that's the first time he yelled at you, and it was out of love, right? Mm-hmm. He wants to protect you. He wants you to be safe and stable. But, people say, life's risky and no one gets out alive. So while you have the opportunity to pursue a dream, do it with everything you have.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how it started and how it's been for coming up on 30 years now with the brewery. It was pure passion. Kevin Buckler from Ashburnham, Peter Quinn from Worcester, and myself, we met at WPI, and we became great friends. They were 1 year ahead of me at school, and the three of us just clicked right from the beginning, right from when I was a freshman. They were sophomores. They kind of took me in under their wing, showed me the ways of the school, helped me figure it out. Quinny pretty much saved me from flunking out by basically kicking me in the ass, telling me, "Go take that physics 2 exam. You're gonna pass it." I was like, I don't know. I don't know the material. I don't think I can. I owe a lot to those guys. They definitely were a big influence on me. They helped me stay in school, and like my dad told me I needed to, and be able to actually graduate. But yeah, that relationship was a very, very strong friendship, and it was based on us adventuring. That was another thing that came from both of my parents, and I have to bring my mom into the equation here as well, if I may. She's a Montana cowgirl, and of all things, how could this possibly end up? The guy here grew up in Central Mass in Gardner, and my mom's from Laurel, Montana. She took a risk by saying yes to him in the early 60s when he proposed to her to bring her back from Montana. And she said to him, the one thing I ask is that if we have children, that they get to come to Montana every summer. So I can say that I was fortunate enough to be able to spend my summers in Montana. When I wasn't doing haying with my dad, I was out there in Montana with my sisters and my mom, and my dad would come out as well. And I think that I got to credit my mom as being the one who was the risk taker as well, and adventurous. She was adventurous enough to come all the way to Mass. She didn't really want to, but she did that out of love as well, obviously. And that's something that I think got instilled in me, and that was something that clicked with Kevin and Quinny. It was like we left WPI every single weekend and went to New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. Way back from when I was a junior, they were seniors. We were never there because we just liked to go on adventures, and it always involved beer. We would stop at this package store in Templeton, Mass, called Gleason's. Gleason's, the package store was known as the beer specialist. And Wayne Ron, who owned it with his father, Wally, who we actually have a beer named after, he was always there, and he had the coolest beer selection on earth. There was all these unique beers that we'd never even heard of. These styles like barley wine, porter. I mean, of course, everyone heard of stout, but so many different things, German beers that we were able to try. So we'd stop at Gleason's on our way to New Hampshire or Vermont. We didn't get to go there on the way to Maine because that was a different direction. But anyway, Wayne ended up coming on board at Wachusett, and he's still with us for coming up on, I'd say, 25 years. So I don't know, just kind of some of the early stories. And, I think that's the foundation of how we were able to do what we did. Having the influences of work ethic, trust in the friendship, knowledge of my friends' capabilities, and then the adventuresome and that whole aspect of life just allowed us. It was just enough of a combination to be able to dive over the edge and go for it.
And then you take that mixture all together and add in a strong passion for beer, and that kind of drives you to where you are now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Passion was what kept us going in the beginning when everybody doubted us. I just realized, and this is another great thing, and I really appreciate being able to be brought in on the show, because it's allowed me to reflect on, almost 30 years now of the history of the company and how we get started, and just even what was going on at the time. And I just realized today, the reality is that, so Wachusett was the first brewery to open in Worcester County since the last brewery closed in Worcester in the 60s. And that was the brewery that brewed Tadcaster Ale. I can't remember the name. I don't think that was the name of the brewery, but I know exactly where it is in Worcester. And then I started thinking about it. The other local brewery that was really big, that a lot of people refer to, was the Carling Black Label Brewery. This is going back to early in the century, 1900s. But that wasn't in Worcester County. So I don't know that there was really any brewery in Worcester County outside of the city of Worcester until Wachusett came along. So I just kind of realized today, as like, we were the first small town brewery of the county ever. I don't know the facts, but I'm going to figure that out because I want to know, because I'd like to be able to say that. Because now, we obviously have breweries in practically almost every town, certainly every city, and justifiably so. It's a great thing for the community. But that's it's just cool to kind of look back and be able to realize what we did was very unique. And that's why people doubted. They were like, why would you open a brewery in Westminster? There's not enough people. Well, that wasn't the point. The point was we were going to make it there, put it in kegs and bottles, eventually, and then bring it to the people. And so that's the motto we started out with.
So how did you guys get actually started brewing?
We started because, so Kev, Quinny, and I were in Maine on a trip. We were up in up in Baxter State Park, and we had hiked up Katahdin. And I found out that the engineering company I was working for at the time in Cambridge was looking for me, and they called the Westminster. I mean, there's like no cell phones back then. They called my mom, and she's like, the only way you're going to find Ned is if someone gets in a helicopter and flies up to Maine, because we don't even know where he is. So, but they wanted me to transfer out to Colorado. And it was like something I really, really wanted to do. And so when I finally got back, I was like, oh my God, I hope it's not too late. Get to the point, got to Colorado, and just saw the beer scene out there and was blown away. I was like, I had always had an intention and an ambition to homebrew, but never done it until I got there and started really drinking really local beer. Breckenridge. I lived just outside of Breckenridge when I was transferred out there. And so while I was living in this little town of Leadville, which is 10,000 plus feet up in the mountains, I found out that Kevin, back living in Connecticut, working for Electric Boat, bought a homebrew kit. And I was like, I went right out to the local store and bought one too, because I didn't want him to make better beer than me. So that's how it really, really got started. Was I knew he was going to be brewing, so I wanted to be brewing as well. So we brewed separately for only about a year. And then when I came back, we got together and decided, well, all right, we're not going to try to outbrew each other. Let's try to make something good together. And Quinny was still in a band at the time. He's a Worcester guy. He had a great band back when we were in college. And he's like, I'm not going to get involved in this because I know it's going to take over my life. It was a classic Quinny statement. But that's the absolute origins. And then we did brew our first batch of beer together in the Black Shack on October Farm here in Westminster, the farm that we live on right now.
And so how long were you out in Colorado?
I was only in Colorado for a year.
And then was your return based on making a decision to brew, or how did that come about?
My return was actually more based on the fact that there's not enough water in Colorado for me. There's plenty of rivers and everything, but I grew up on lakes and obviously near the ocean. And to me, that was the one thing that, as much as incredible as the snowboarding was, and I got the most snowboarding days of my entire life that one year, I just, I didn't want to be away from water. I've become kind of almost obsessed with water over the course of my life. And so that was a primary reason. We hadn't decided to do the brewery by any means. I had myself transferred back within the engineering company, and then it was us brewing together that caused it was the catalyst for us to say, we might be able to turn the corner on this. Between two engineers and a biologist. Quinny's a biologist. Kevin was a mechanical engineer. Brilliant mechanical engineer. I was just like the guy who just kind of was the facilitator. I'm like, I have a degree in civil. But that actually worked out well because I had some very serious experience working with the federal government and knowing regulations, and then having to negotiate through the, back then, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was helpful. So, between the three of us, I started looking at it, and I thought, we might be able to do this. And Kevin thought, yeah, we might be able to do this. Quinny was like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. There's no way. He didn't have an entrepreneurial bone in his body. It took me about 2 weeks to finally convince Kevin that we really should start writing a business plan. Or actually, we started writing it, and then it took us 6 months to convince Quinny that this was actually going to be something we're going to try to make a living at. And we did it. So.
What were those early days like day to day? Your work, you guys are all working during the day, and then you get together at night?
Yep. Yeah, we had full-time jobs. Kev left Electric Boat. He just decided he didn't want to be building nuclear subs for his career. He actually left and decided he wanted to go build log cabins out in Idaho, and I had to convince him to not do that to try to start the brewery. So he was just doing stuff to get by until he could get to Idaho, which included he was substitute teaching and doing other things to kind of just make ends meet temporarily. And Quinny had left he left a really big job in an environmental company as a biologist, and he was working for the phone company with his father. I think it was New England Telephone back then, and he was kind of really liking it, but ultimately I think it was definitely, with all respect, maybe a little bit below his skill set and his education and all that time he'd put in at WPI. So I think that I tried to convince him that he could do something with what he went to school for, and really kind of take that to another level. And maybe that was what helped. But we were working full-time jobs. I was working in Cambridge. I would leave Cambridge, drive to Westminster, work on the brewery with Kevin and Quinny. They'd be there. That we'd meet there. They would go our separate ways at late night. I'd go back to Cambridge first thing in the morning, come back to Westminster, and that went on for months. It's not easy.
And now, can you explain at all, like, I guess, where you guys' head was at? Because at that time, as you said earlier, you guys were the first to do it. There was no model to look at and say, well, so-and-so's doing it, so we could just do what they did and then figure it out, do it our own way. Now, that's what everyone else did based on what you guys have done. Now all these breweries that are popping up around Fitchburg and Clinton and all over, they're all based off of, really the model that you guys, paved the way for.
Yeah, the little town breweries, or small city breweries. Yeah, there were some examples of breweries that we were able to model ourselves after, and I would be remiss not to mention Steve Mason at Catamount Brewing Company. It's long gone, but that was up in White River Junction, Vermont. Lawrence Miller was the owner of Otter Creek Brewing Company, way up in Middlebury, Vermont. He became a friend of ours. We would stop in at Long Trail a lot and talk to them. The owner back then wasn't really open to talking to anyone who was starting a brewery, and understandably so. But some of his crew were, and interestingly, the current director of brewing operations, or director of operations for Wachusett, is a 27-year veteran, Matt Quinlan of Long Trail Brewing Company. And we used to visit Matt 20 plus years, almost 30 years ago. We'd visit with Matt, and he was a young employee at Long Trail, and he was willing to, talk to us and support us and help us. But there was another brewer in Brattleboro, Vermont, very good friend of our company, Ray McNeil from McNeil's Brewery. He was instrumental in encouraging us to brew, and Ray is a mad scientist, and he would offer us all kinds of advice on our what we called our pilot brews, because we weren't licensed yet. We were just still advanced homebrewers, and Ray would critique our beers, and he's just brilliant. And it was very helpful. So there were some out there that would help us. David Geary, a longtime friend of ours from Portland, Maine, and David's out of the industry now. Most of them are all out now, but there were some. Fortunately, there were some that were out there that we were in awe of them. But we had to travel to see them.
Far outside of Central Mass, for
right.
sure.
Yeah. But that was all part of the adventure. We'd throw a kayak up on the old Bronco, mountain bikes on the spare tire, and head off. And it was just an incredible time. Drinking beer, everywhere we went, listening, learning, and I felt that we were really going to do this way earlier than either of them did. There was something in me back even when I was at WPI. I remember sitting through my lectures senior year and just sitting in the back row thinking, what am I going to do with this when I get out of here? Because I don't want to do this. I don't want to design wastewater treatment plants. I don't want to design collection systems for sewers. I figured I'd end up like owning a backhoe and maybe design septic systems, install them myself. That's what I thought I'd do. But then once I got out and was in engineering, all I was doing was looking. And fortunately, we were able to follow the passion and build a brewery. And it's kind of a miracle that we made it, because it was our first beers were not that good. Not gonna lie. I think they're a lot better now.
I think a lot of people would. I don't know about what they were like before, but I think a lot of people would agree that they're pretty good now.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
How did you guys go from being like advanced home brewers going into the commercial space officially? What did that look like as far as licensing and like the actual build out of the brewing?
Well, the tough thing there was that we couldn't get funding. I went to several banks with what I thought was the best business plan that was ever written, and was just getting shot down left and right. They're like, no, that's not something that can succeed in Westminster. It's like, well, I don't really understand. And I think the reason why was that there weren't many breweries yet in mass that were actually packaging their beer and selling it from distribution. So the models they were looking at were Commonwealth Brewing Company in downtown Boston, right near the Garden. They were looking at Boston Beer Works, just outside of Fenway. And, of course, breweries that are doing that, where they're making beer and selling it right on site, which is obviously the most successful equation even currently. That no one thought that could happen in Westminster, but we tried to explain, well, we're going to bring it. We're going to distribute. There was only a couple breweries doing it at the time. One in Ipswich, and we got to know those guys and spent time up there volunteering on Saturdays, helping, just basically clean. But Quinny was just so passionate about the biology of it, and their brewer immediately took to Quinny because he was asking all the questions. He had done fermentation studies at WPI. Kevin with the mechanics, he was helping fix their equipment that was breaking down. So we were really an asset as volunteers. And the only other brewery that really had distribution success was Harpoon. But this is all still pretty early in the game, so the banks didn't know about that. So that was the hardest thing. And we were really fortunate that we were able to be financed by someone right here from Leominster. At the time, the bank was Fleet Bank. Ray LaFond was who just finished his tenure with Enterprise Bank. He was the only one that believed in us, and the reason he said he did, and he stuck his neck out for us, and it's definitely true, was because he called it the hat trick from WPI. And I can say that right now, that's the most powerful thing that I've ever been able to use with my degree, because eventually I became a beer engineer. I didn't really follow my career in civil, but the fact that Ray trusted in us and got us financing through the SBA, that's the only way we could have ever done it. Without that, couldn't have ever got off the ground. And we had to use all of our resources. We went to used scrap yards for stainless tanks, and we'd scour through catalogs. Granger is a big giant catalog for industrial supplies, and McMaster Carr, and we designed burners for a brew kettle out of that. And Kevin put it all together and made it work for like the least amount of money we could possibly build a brewery. So that was a lot of serious creativity. But again, fortunately, there were some people, again, like the breweries up in Vermont, New Hampshire, not even really New Hampshire, just Vermont and Maine, that did help us when we had questions.
Now, I had read, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, that you had gotten some friends and family to purchase equipment, and you had like they basically financed it for you, and you set up a deal with them.
We did, yeah. So we did a first round of financing, as I said, with Fleet Bank and Ray, and like cheers to Ray. He's like a commercial lending angel for our company. Great guy. So yeah, we burned through that really quickly, and I found that was really kind of a messed up situation. So the SBA, right? Small Business Administration is they like back these loans from private banks. So the private bank really is almost no risk. So the SBA backs them with government money, but the fees were unbelievable. And so it's like by the time we got all the fees taken out, it was like, Ray, this is even close to what we need. He's like, yeah, I know. He's like, but there's nothing we can do. He's like, they have to back the loans. So we didn't have enough money to even really open. So that's when we had to decide what we're going to do next. And so we went out to friends and family, and some of them made an investment. Believe it or not, my parents was actually one small group that decided they were going to trust in us even after the disappointment of my dad. And then a few other local, almost like angel investors with a really small amount of money, but desperately needed it. We also found a way in a second round where we did get more financing institutionally, but then capped out at that, but needed more. We were able to figure out a way to purchase tanks that at the time were worth a lot of money because the industry was now starting to really explode. It was hard to get tanks, and once you got them, it was like they were valuable. So it was kind of like enough collateral that we convinced more friends and family to buy tanks and then hold title to them. And it was kind of almost against what we were supposed to do with our covenants with the bank, but we figured out that gray area to just be able to get through and do that. And that was just another way that we were able to get our bottling line up and running in 97, and all just creative financing.
And I think, like one of the biggest things that holds people back, probably like 80% of people just never get started at all. They have this idea, man, it would be cool to open a brewery, and then that's where it ends. And then of those people that do get started, they get that first no or second no, and it's like, I guess it's not going to work. And to end up where you are, you needed to push through all those no's and start to think creatively and, well, how can we make this work? If we can't do it this way, if Bank of America is not going to give us any money, who would give us money? Who believes in us? And who can we sit down with, explain, here's what we're really trying to do? And just because no one around here has done it doesn't mean it's not possible.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the skepticism was abounding. It was tough. And for a while, I remember it was really tough, especially in 94 when we were building, and we were doing it all. We didn't have anybody helping us. We were doing all of the electric, even though we weren't supposed to, all the plumbing, even though we weren't supposed to. It was just like those gray areas where we had a permit to build, but fortunately we had friends that were tradesmen that would back us if we needed them, with pulling a permit if we needed, but they knew we were going to do the work because we couldn't afford to pay them. So fortunately they trusted in Kevin and his electrical ability and his plumbing and, stuff that I was the farm mechanic. That was the last thing we wanted, was a farm mechanic in there, but it was enough to help get things done. I could grind like nobody's business. You can grind steel. It was just continual. People come through the door and just doubt, just continue to doubt. And I was like, after a while, I was like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to listen to this. I said, right now, you could pull out a gun and shoot me in the chest because you're so doubtful of this. And I'd be like, just pissed off because you just slowed us down. I mean, we're not stopping. We're going to do this until like someone comes and locks the doors on us. And, that was what it took to punch through. And I remember I wrote a sign. I have it at my house. It's in the barn at October Farm now. I wrote a sign to inspire Kevin and Quinny because we were killing ourselves, sweating copper joints until we could barely even see at night, and then have to just grab a couple hours of sleep, go to our jobs, come back, do it again. So I wrote the sign. If you build it, they will drink. Just with a big Sharpie on a big piece of paper. And it actually somehow made it through all the years. And it was even up on the wall recently when we opened up the brew yard. I dug it out and stuck it up on the wall. But we got to that point where that was for the doubters. It was like, read the sign. See you later. We got to get back to work. And we don't have time. Boy, it was alternative rock and roll and Mountain Dew. That's what we used to say the brewery was built on. We could fill a 55-gallon drum of empty Mountain Dew bottles and then take them back for the deposit because we needed the money. And Quinny brought in his PA system from his band. He called it the Power. And we would play the music on 11 all night. We couldn't, if we were this close to each other, we couldn't even hear each other. If you were yelling at the top of your lungs, but it didn't matter. It was just like, you could kind of do silent, that needs to be ground off. That needs to be, I'm over here doing this. We didn't need to talk. And then sometimes the police would come in like, what the hell is going on in here? And so we got to become really good friends, especially with the night officers, Larry Jupin in particular. And we actually named a beer after Larry. Larry was actually taken out in the line of duty in Westminster back in, it was the late 90s when he got hit, and he passed in 2000. So anyone out there who knows Larry, look carefully at the label because there's a shield on it for Larry Jupin. Yeah, but so Larry would come in late at night and be like, you guys are nuts. It's like, yeah. Larry turned out to be one of our best volunteers. As soon as we started our bottling line for 3 years, he was there helping us label all until about 10:30 at night when he had to go home, put on his uniform, and go out and do his beat. So, yeah, crazy stuff back then. Volunteers. We needed volunteers to help us run our bottling line from 1997 till 2000 because we couldn't afford to pay the labor. So the way we paid was someone would go to Papa Gino's, pick up 6 pizzas, and then at the end of the night, any beer that wasn't quite 12 ounces was called a short fill. We'd put the labels in upside down on the labeler, label all those upside down, and then they needed to be taken home because they technically didn't exist to the feds. So we call them shorties. So it was pizza and shorties and rock and roll as loud as you could possibly stand. That's just come on, some of those stories about those early days.
How much did you lean on that friendship with the three of you guys and your vision during that time when you had so many people doubting that you would even get this off the ground?
I think that, I guess, maybe goes back to the farm again or something, that the work ethic's going to get you through. It's going to get it done. You just got to keep working and working and working. And after we started, yeah, it was definitely just had to stay positive somehow, and after we started, so even before, it was even before we finally turning the corner, and there's so many dimensions to this. We self-distributed our beer for the first several years. We can go down that road if we have time to even talk about it, but that was a very important thing for us to do. But going back to your point, in 98, we were once again out of money. Excuse me. And hazard the job. I think I need another one.
Go for it.
Yeah.
We gotta.
All right, take a quick time out.
Well, we got a beer guy, so he'll grab it and bring it over to us.
You got a beer guy? That's
Very
great.
nice.
We got a bunch now at the brewery, so awesome. Thank you very much. This is such a refreshing brew in the middle of the summer here. Boy, what a nice day it was today. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm like deviating too far from your question, but I remember we were talking about some of the difficulties of getting through, and I remember in 98, I called Quinny out and Kev out and said, I'd like to have a meeting out at the barn at October Farm, because we had just started bottling only in 97, and unfortunately for us, Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams, had decided to come out with these things called seasonal brews. And we decided that we needed to have seasonal brews too to be able to compete with them. And the problem was that we didn't have the money to be able to afford all of the design and all of the plates and the separations they called back then. I don't think this technology even exists anymore. But all of these things had these huge expenses to every brew that we came out with, including our summer, which is the exact same formula it has been since 1997. Our Oktoberfest, our Quins, and our winter. All of those beers, actually doing those seasonals almost sunk our company. And I remember having a meeting with them, and I told them, I said, I was apologetic. I was like, I wish I could have seen that, but I couldn't. And we couldn't get any more money. Not from the banks, not from any more. There was no more friends and family to go to that had money. And I told them, I said, I'm prepared for us to tell Ray, our good friend, our banker friend, that we're not going to be able to pull through this unless the three of us went to 80 hours a week with no salary. We were making $25,000 each. No salary for the foreseeable future. That's what I told him. And I said, that's the only way I think that we can get through this. And 80 hours is tough. 70 is tough. But it's the 70th to the 80th that are toughest. And at that time, Kev came right back into my office later that day and said, I'm in. And Quinny had to have a conversation with, he was married at the time, and he had a conversation with his wife, and he said, I can't be in. So we had to try to figure out a way to buy Quinny out when we had no money. And then Kev and I had to go to 80 hours a week. So we figured out a way to make Quinny a job offer to get him out of brewing and into sales. And then like a small miracle happened where we had put up just going back to the self-distribution, we'd put up a territory for sale to get out of the distribution, and it had been shot down by everyone we approached. Someone came through at the last minute and said they'll take it. It was a distributor, a beer distributor, Mass, and that was just enough to keep us going. It was just like that. 98 was brutal, and it wasn't just us. The late 90s, we lost 50% of the breweries that had opened in Mass between 97 and 2000. And we were one of the ones that got by. It was seriously a small miracle.
You know, some people might chalk that up to luck, but I mean, I think it's pretty lucky that you had some owners that were willing to work 80 hours a week with no pay to be able to get through that time period. And then you treated people well and things started to fall in line.
Yeah, the volunteers were there for everything. We needed volunteers for running our bottling line. It took 10 of them, in addition to Kevin and myself. And the way it worked is we'd start at 6 p.m. and go until we were done. And originally in 97, that was only like till 10 o'clock. But then by 98, it was like 11:30. By 99, it was going to be like way after midnight. And that was tough on volunteers who all had jobs and families. So, yeah, it was incredible. The support that we had locally, I could sit here for the rest of this conversation and name off names. That it's just the list is huge. And they not only did that, but we had to do some festivals early on. That was another tool that we used for survival, because that retail money was just huge for us. There's so much more profit in selling at retail than selling to our wholesalers, or even still we were self-distributing, even that. And all of our festivals need to be staffed by volunteers, friends, and family. And we did it again and again and again until eventually my family was like, Ned, we can't do this anymore. This is really hard. And it was true. So we stopped doing festivals for a while. And I remember we finally were talked into doing one again. And I mean, we took off from 2000 until 2006. I remember in 2006, we decided we were going to do one again because they were really fun and they were awesome. And it's great to have, the community come out and have a great time, good bands. And I remember in 2006, we decided, all right, we will do it. I said, but the thing is that we're doing this only for charity. And we had been working with this organization in Westminster called Neighbors Helping Neighbors since we opened in 94. And our 12th year in working with them, we donated all profits from that event to charity. And it made me actually feel better. And I think it was better for everybody that was working there and working really hard. I was like, okay, my family did come back and help. And it's like, all right, but this is all for charity. This isn't for the brewery now. This is for charity. We're able to stand on our own for this. And so I remember we wrote a check for $9,000 to Neighbors Helping Neighbors. It was the largest donation they'd ever had, I think, at the time. So that was good stuff.
And I'd like to get some. I want to put a pin in that because I want to talk about some of the other things that you've done for the community. But just so that was, you said 2006, right? So would you be able to give a bit of an overview of how the business model evolved from starting out up to there? You talked about the distribution and stuff. That was kind of a unique way that you guys did that.
Yeah, I can probably do that quickly.
You don't feel like you got to rush at all. We got plenty of time.
No, yeah. So the that's so you've heard the infancy to startup, which is a lot of the story. I mean, trying to persevere and get through, trying to get the money, trying to finding ways to just even get it off the ground. That was a difficult period. And then there's fairly kind of straightforward segments after that. So 94. So we founded it in 93.
Me too.
What's that?
I said I was founded.
You were founded in 93. Hey, cheers to that. Good year.
Yeah, it was.
93. Yeah. We did that. We did that ourselves. We bought a kit for I think $80. There wasn't online because there was no online. So it was a mail order catalog. You could order corporation startup kits. And it was just basically you fill in the blanks with your information. You get a corporate stamp and stuff. And we still use that corporate stamp, the same one today. It's the only corporate seal we ever had. All right, moving on. So incorporated in 93, started in 94. In 94, we had just enough time to be able to sell 2 batches of beer before the end of the year. The first one was Country Pale Ale, and we sold the entire batch in clear growler bottles. We wanted to have brown bottles, but we couldn't get brown bottles. It was clear. That was the only choice. Silk screened. The quality of the silk screening was horrible. It was by the time we even filled them, all the letters were practically falling off. Coney was calling it alphabet soup. It was a nightmare. But people still bought them. It was actually it was decent. I was actually referring to our pilot brews were not good at all. That was another thing that was discouraging. It was like, well, we weren't making good pilot beer, so how do we expect anyone to support us? But we were like, well, when we have controls in place, we know we're going to be able to make it better. And fortunately, we were able to. So we had that batch. We had another batch. Completely honestly, something went very awry with an outlet tube on our brew kettle. It had a bunch of char on it, and we didn't know, and we brought the whole batch out of the kettle, and it picked up this char flavor, and it went into the tank, the finishing tank, and Quinny gave it to me to taste, and I was like, it tastes like cigarette butts. And he's like, no, it doesn't. I was like, Quinny, it does. And he's like, it does. I was like, what are we going to do? We got to sell this batch of beer. And he's like, we got this. So we figured out a way to take a bunch of specialty grains, dark malts and everything, and made this tea and blended it in with this beer to mask the off flavor. I don't think I've ever even talked about this before. So we did it. We added some other special ingredients that I definitely can't talk about. And it was a hit. We hand labeled these country pale ale growlers special Christmas ale and sold the whole batch. And it was another time to like help save the company because we needed the cash to buy more grain. Anyway, moving forward from that.
Well, before you move forward on that, it's like, you know, from a business perspective and like as you're growing, so quantity wise, how much beer was that?
That was 600 gallons.
And what do you guys brew now, like in a batch or in a month, we'll say?
Batch right now is 1,200, and we do 50 plus batches a week.
So you make that mistake on a small scale that allows you to not make it now that you're brewing 100 times that a month. And I think that that's valuable as you start to build up, is like figuring that stuff out and the bump and go. And like, instead of saying, well, scrap it, toss it, we're going to have to start over. It's like, well, that's not an option.
It wasn't an option.
So we got to figure something out.
We did. Yeah. It's funny that comes. Yeah, this is really a great experience. I'm so glad to be here because it's kind of fun to look back at this stuff. At the time, it wasn't fun. When it sold out, it was fun. But when we were standing there tasting it, I was like, oh God. But so that's 94. That's how 94 ended. We sold out that batch of special Christmas ale. And then at the end of 94, it was like, all right, 95 starting, and what are we going to do next? And someone asked me, well, what are you doing for invoices and in your billing? And I was like, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about it. So I decided I better figure that out. So I found a catalog that had been sent to us because we incorporated from this company called Nebs. It was out in Groton. And I'm like, I'll just order a book of invoices small enough to fit in my back pocket because I'm going to be the only driver and salesman for this company for the next who knows how long. And so that's what I did. We started up the self-distribution. We started out with a Ford F-150 two-wheel drive truck, which was my truck, towing a U-Haul trailer, which isn't really necessarily legal in the Commonwealth. But at that time, I was like, whatever. We'd load both of those things up, and I'd head out and try to sell the beer for everything on the truck. For us, we would just put everything that we had made in the truck and the trailer and start driving. I called it shotgunning, kind of yet another beer term. And it was like, I'm not going to come back here until I have sold everything. And we don't necessarily know that it wasn't legal back then, but we don't necessarily know that it was legal. So anyway, yeah, that was just one more of those things. It's like, all right, well, the ABCC has all the right to come figure it out. And if they figure it out and they tell us, no, you're not supposed to do that, I guess we would have asked, well, where does it say that we can't? And they always said, well, I guess it was always said by the lawyers, well, if it's not written that it's allowed, then it's not allowed. So I don't know. That doesn't make too much sense to me.
Sometimes the gray area is good to operate in.
Oh, we've operated in a lot of gray. So yeah, so it's kind of like things accelerated quickly from that point. We did the self-distribution. We sold the rights in 1998 to a chunk of the state, to an established Massachusetts distributor, and that kept us going. And then we really dug deep. We had 3 trucks running at that time. Quinny was out as our sales manager, full bore. So we had a founder out in the trade, pouring his heart into it. We had some other great team members. Each one would drive a truck and sell at the same time, just like the way I started out in 95. And we put a serious hurting on Sam Adams. And that's handled by Atlas Distributing out of Auburn. So that was our prime target. I mean, Sam Adams and Boston Beer and Jim Cook, who has, become a friend over the years, of course, they were the best at marketing. Jim Cook is a brilliant marketeer. I owe tremendous respect to him, and I said for the longest time, the only reason Wachusett was able to exist is because Jim Cook told the American public, you can try something different. Don't be afraid. It has a lot of flavor. It's okay. You can try it. And then when people tried it, they were like, wow, this does have a lot of flavor. It's really pretty good. So, thanks to Jim and, what Boston Beer did. But nonetheless, in Central Mass, it was like, this isn't Boston, this is Central Mass. They had 2 or 3 draft lines almost at every restaurant. It's like, well, why does that have to be? We don't have any right now. Or, maybe we had country in there. We hadn't even invented blueberry yet. So we went after those multiple Sam lines, and we're very effective at it. And that's when Atlas really started to talk to us. Joe Solois from Atlas Distributing, he had come to the brewery personally before we even opened, expressing his interest in working with us. I told him at the time, we don't know this industry at all. We don't know the brewing industry, and we don't know the beer business. We need to learn those both, and then maybe we can talk, because I felt like we needed to meet people and tell them who we were and establish ourselves out there. So that strategy, I guess it paid off. So that was from 98 to 2000. And by then it started to become difficult to run the 2 companies. I mean, we were running 2 companies. We were running a brewery and a beer distributorship. And we decided we had to make a choice. And we chose, well, there was not really a choice. We had to focus on brewing. And so almost 5 years to the day that we opened, I called Joe Solois, left a voicemail. He called me back 2 minutes later and said, Ned, I will meet you anywhere you want, anytime. We want your brand. I was like, that's what we wanted in a wholesaler, to know that they cared enough and they knew that there was an opportunity for them and for us. And so Joe and I met, and that was 2000, and we are with them today. Atlas is our partner in Central Mass. We have the best relationship, and we all of our people know all of their people. We've worked as a team for this many years now. It's great. And so that's been our focus and has been, and I think that's what's absolutely critical, is that we focused originally doing it ourselves as locally as possible. And then now with Atlas, nothing has changed our commitment to Central Mass and working with Atlas. That's representative of 22 years of business. And the only thing that's really changed in that was in 2006, we went to our first state outside of Massachusetts, because I was convinced by another wholesaler we were working with, the other one that we had sold to in 98. I was convinced that would work. And we went to the state of New York, and I was I was skeptical and said it's not going to be the same, and it really wasn't the same. It's not the same when there's breweries that had already been established in New York. They're making really good pale ale and making great IPA. There was 5 blueberry beers being made in New York in 06, but we got convinced to go there, and it was a nice boost to business, and then followed suit with other states, Rhode Island in 08, and then, eventually New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, and that's really been it for the Wachusett brand. But what the Wachusett brand has been 85% of our volume, maybe dipped down to 80% mass. It's been mass uses. Mass uses is what we did. It's what Kevin Quinney and I set out to do, was be local and sell it here. People used to tell me when I was young in the industry, you're going to be the next Sam Adams. And I said, we don't want to be the next Sam Adams. I don't want to be Jim Cook. I don't want to sell our beer in Hawaii. We don't, that's not what we set out to do. We're Central Mass guys. We want to do it here. So nothing really changed that much. We picked up the distribution in the other states, and it's been great. And we still have great relationships in those states with our wholesalers. And the biggest change happened in, it started to happen about 2012 when I was looking at it, thinking that we're going to eventually have to open something, some type of a restaurant or on-premise thing. And everyone in the company that had been with us from the beginning or throughout it all, they knew of anyone as the founder and as even the remaining founder in 2012. That's the last thing in the world I wanted to do. I'm an engineer. I like doing tours. I loved having people come. I loved having a retail store, but I didn't want to get in the business because from what I saw when I started out, how difficult the industry is, how much respect I have for those in the on-premise business, I didn't feel like we should be part of it. And I also didn't want us to be a competitor with those that had supported us since 1994, especially in the town of Westminster, Fitchburg, Leominster, Gardner. It's like, I don't want to take away from their businesses. So it was 2012 when we really started looking at that, and we had to change laws for us because we had a special license at that point that almost no one else in the state had. And we had to work with our local senator, local representative. That was Jennifer Flanagan and Kim Ferguson, and they helped us tremendously negotiate these through a couple of different law changes to get to the place where we would be able to do it with our license structure. And it took all the way until the end of 2017 to get there. And we were finally able to open the Wachusett Brew Yard in 2017. And that was the most significant change that we had since 2000, getting out of self-distribution. I don't regret it. It's definitely a whole new dimension. I do think that, fortunately, the people that we've had at Wachusett helping in that division have done such an amazing job of building something that is welcoming to the community. We did it in a different way. I went around personally to all the restaurants in Fitchburg, Leominster, Gardner, and Westminster in 17 and told everyone what we're going to do. I wouldn't allow us to buy or build a restaurant itself or build a kitchen. I was very specific that country pale ale, the original. Thank you, beer man. This is great. My favorite since the beginning. Oh, and that's our barn right there. That's the October Farm barn right on the label. This one, we brewed like 30 or 40 batches of this before we ever came out with this, our first beer. Sorry for the interruption.
No interruption.
So, that's so good. So, and yeah, anyway, so, we opened it up. the brew yard and did it under what an engineer wanted. I wanted us to have food trailers essentially, and be like, if you want food, we're a brewery. You're welcome here. We love having you here, but we're not going to serve you at your table. If you want food, we're going to ask that you go up there and order it. We're going to ask that you go and pick it up. If you want to have table service, then go to one of our great supporting restaurants. Has been with us like the Old Mill since 1994. If you want table service, go there. If you want to hang out here, drink beer, listen to music, it's a little more self-involved, or it's a little more participation oriented. And that's something that I had seen in California when I was buying some equipment early on, and I was like, wow, I went to a barbecue restaurant and saw this incredible place, and no one had a problem going up, placing an order, getting a vibrating disc and going back to their seat, and when the thing went off, they went and picked up their food. It's like, we could do that. Don't want to be table service, don't ever want to be table service, don't want to take away from those that work that whole program, which is so much more difficult. So we did set ourselves aside by doing that. And it wasn't until this past year, 2021, we had to build a kitchen, but it's still on axles. It's still movable, and it's still not permanent. And that's because it's just the way I wanted it to be. Didn't want it to be built in the building. We're still not a restaurant. We're a brewery that serves food. Our food quality, in my opinion, has gone through the roof. It's the best we've ever had. We've brought on a whole barbecue menu, and our team, we have a father-son team, Jamie and Gary Roy. They're just doing an incredible job. They built a barbecue program, and the stuff is incredible, and I'm proud of it. But you still have to kind of order on your phone. That's a COVID thing. And we do bring the food to you, but you're still using plastic utensils, and it's simple stuff. It's kind of like being at a picnic more than a restaurant. And I'm totally cool with that. And I hope that we never really change that. And I'm glad that the community appreciates it. And they should still go to the local restaurants, because they are very critical to our region also, and I don't ever want to see business taken away from them. I like to think that now that we're bigger and we have all this outdoor seating and everything, people are coming out to our area to see us. Hopefully they'll stop in there, and maybe they'll drink a couple beers at our place and then go up and have dinner up at the Blueprint in center town, or the Colonial Inn, or the Old Mill, maybe go down to Slattery's. Any of the local businesses, I like to think that we're contributing to business for everybody now, by doing this.
What's it like to look back, and think of Westminster, kind of the middle of nowhere, and that first sign that you drew out, and if you build it, and then see what you've gone on to build?
Well, it's pretty wild. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I started flying last year on a powered parachute, and I've had a couple times recently to be able to fly over the brewery. And to fly over the brewery on a Saturday or a Sunday, when the field across the street, which we lease from the town, and thank goodness the town has been so amazing to us, see that full of cars, and then people everywhere in the grounds, and then all the tanks, and it's beyond gratifying. It's amazing to see, that level of, construction. And I mean, that the thing is now considered like a campus. It kind of sprawls out over like 6 acres, and there's 700 seats. And people are out there. There's bands playing. It's really awesome. It's so, never could have expected that. I did expect us to be a big, not big, but a strong distributing local brewery when we set out. That's what our business plan was written as. And but the adding the on-premise dimension has been just been tremendous. And then when we opened in 2020 in Worcester, the Worcester Brew Yard, that's a whole nother dimension as well. So that's a beast of its own. And having Polar Park come in, it's a whole new dimension for us. And I'm really happy that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts allows us to do this through our license structure, which we did have to modify. But there's so many more things we still want to implement that it's just going to make it better and better. We actually have a distilled spirits plant license with the federal government now. So we are actually allowed now. Oh, we have one with the state as well. So we are actually allowed right now to distill. So we plan on eventually, or as soon as we can, if there's not too many other things going on like pandemics and stuff, we're going to crank up our little still and start making our own vodkas and some other things. So there's plenty more to come.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And something that sticks with me, and I'd like maybe if you to talk a little bit about, is a slogan that you guys have had really from the beginning. It's like enjoy with friends. Yeah.
Enjoy with friends. That's, it's kind of, that goes back to the early branding. Kevin, Quinny and I were not we had no branding experience, no marketing experience. We didn't have any accounting experience. We didn't have any business experience. We didn't have any experience. We just wanted to build a brewery. And it was the three friends. And it's almost similar to like sitting on the porch of my parents' house, looking at this red barn, this maple tree and Wachusett Mountain. And Quinny saying, I'm like, well, what are we going to use for a logo? He's like, why don't we use that? And I was like, okay, check. And then, okay, I don't know. It's like, did we really have to have some type of tagline? No, probably not. But someone said it. And this is way early on because we had it on our first growlers. And that was it. It's like, this is like kind of, it's the definition, and it's a true moniker of these three guys and these three friends that, kind of stood up to the odds and defeated them all. And I'm really proud of that. We chose that as an expression because no one else has, well, maybe they couldn't, but I don't think we ever trademarked it or anything. No competitors take it.
Don't.
No, nobody out there take it now.
Tomorrow morning.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Do you hear that, compliance? Let's get on that. The compliance manager is my wife, by the way. She's been with us for 12 years doing it. Our in-house lawyer. So, yeah, I'll be calling you, honey, just in a little bit. Make sure we get that trademarked. But yeah, enjoy with friends. Proud to have that on there,
Well, I think it kind of defines your brand and where you've come from and what you do. And I'm sure millions of other times of enjoying the beer with other friends of people that you don't know and never met, but they can think of you when they do get to do that.
I think there's been millions of times, and there has. I probably have had millions of times and experiences myself.
I know you got a lot going on. One more question I wanted to ask you is, everything you've done, where you started from, the dip in the 90s where so many brewers went out of business and all the trials and tribulations you've gone through. What's the difference between you guys and Wachusett and, everyone else out there?
Well, I think that I'd have to say that we've touched on several things here during this conversation that are the culmination of that. There's the adversity that we faced from not having enough money, having to self-distribute because we didn't know what we were doing and needed to learn the industry, having to diversify constantly, change, resist change when I didn't think it was right or we didn't think it was right. Like we never made extreme beer. Extreme. It just didn't seem like what we wanted to do. We wanted to make, local drinkable craft beer, like country and summer. And so, making those decisions to not go full bore into making all our beers have too many hops, those are like, they're kind of like both manufacturing and marketing decisions. But I guess I'd have to say that, it was early on, just the perseverance and the work ethic goes back to, how we started this conversation. Myself growing up on the farm, Kevin, Quinny, they had the same work ethic. Kev, both very hard workers, the resiliency. Quinny, when he first got out in the trade, I remember him, being a biologist, not a salesman. He was a showman as an entertainer. But I remember one of the quotes he had, it was, I'll never forget it as long as I live. He was so resilient. He would go into accounts. There was one particular account in Milford. He'd go there and the owner couldn't stand him for some reason. Don't know why. He tried to figure out why, but he couldn't figure it out. But he'd go there and get basically kicked out week after week after week. And he just couldn't get the beer in there. And then one day the guy said to him, all right, I'll try it. And he tried it. He took one sip of a bottle and he said, this tastes like shit. And Quinny said, no doubt, my man, but it sells 2 kegs a week right down the street. And he's like, fuck it, send me 2 kegs. I mean, he went there again and again. That's just one little factor is that, for someone to do that. I mean, I have so much respect for that. Because who would do that? Be told to go, get out. I don't want to buy your beer and still keep going. Who would do that? So just a combination of the strengths of 3 guys that just, we had different strengths that all work together, and it continues on now. During COVID, man, I'd never seen such incredible efforts by a team. We had been up and operating since 17, and all of a sudden we were just getting everything going good with our on-premise, and bam, we're shut down. Mandated, everyone was. Wow. That has become a very important revenue stream. What are we going to do? So just start thinking. Think. I remembered that we have a very unique license structure that no one else had in the state at the time. We actually have a license for our off-premise sales, meaning we actually have, as known in Massachusetts, a package store in the building that looks like it's part of us, but it's not. It's actually a separate license. And package stores in Massachusetts are allowed to deliver beer. It's not commonly known, it's not commonly practiced, but some stores do it, and they do it very successfully. It's like, well, we were allowed to deliver food. We were the first brewery in the state during COVID to be able to deliver beer with our food. And as soon as we put that out there, it went crazy. And then within one day, we got a call from the ABCC. They called Kim, and they asked her, and it was the investigator that deals with us all the time. He said, Kim, how can you do this? And she said, we have a Section 15 bolted onto our Section 19, and you know that the Section 15 is allowed to do that. And he said, okay, that's all I needed to know. But then we heard from the rest of the brewers in the state, and they were all upset that we were able to do that. I was like, well, if you look at our license structure, we pay tens of thousands in license structure and license fees over the year, where most breweries pay very, very little, which is great for them. But we did that purposefully. And this goes back to Kim Ferguson, Jen Flanagan, Brian Zlotnick helping us get the law changes to be able to be really diversified. So diversification, I guess, I don't know, just a combination of a whole bunch of things allowed us to survive.
Well, I mean, I want to thank you, creativity. Thank you for your creativity. Thank you for never giving up on your dream. Thank you for not compromising when other people wanted you to do it a different way. And thank you for coming down here to tell this story, because this has really been an amazing experience for me.
Well, it's been great for me too. I really appreciate being invited in. It's always fun to look back. And I'm really proud of what everybody at Wachusett has done. There's so many families that have succeeded and done well and benefited from everyone in Central Mass buying our beer. It wasn't people buying out of the state. We would have gone out of business if we relied on that. So we're just really fortunate that we've had that kind of support locally. And if anyone ever looks back, there's some video of me at our 25th anniversary, and I went up there on stage and it just came right out of my heart. It was like, thank you, everyone who's local, because you're the reason we exist. And everyone local is why we will continue to exist and succeed. So this has been awesome. Thanks. I think we need a toast.
Cheers.